Diffusion of Innovation, presented by Group 3, Manny, Joanna, Lizeth, and Harper.
My group's presentation is on the diffusion of innovation theory. This theory was developed in 1962 by a professor of rural psychology named Everett Rogers. This theory is focused to explain how, why, and at what rate new ideas spread. There are 5 different adopter groups, and every individual in society falls into one of those groups depending on either how early or how quickly they can adopt the innovation. The 5 groups consist of the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggers. People who adopt an innovation early have different characteristics than people who adopt an innovation later. In order to change a behavior of an individual, you need to market each adopter group differently using distinct communication channels and messages, since diffusion is only possible when the individual perceives the idea, behavior, or product as new or innovative.
Innovators account for 2.5% of the population. These are the first people to pick up a new idea. They want to be the first people to try the innovation, and they love taking risks. Very little, if anything, needs to be done to appeal to this part of the population. Regardless of how difficult the innovation is to understand or use, and the extent to which the innovation can be tested, this part of the population is willing to put in the effort and see for themselves how great this new idea can be.
The second adopter group is called the early adopters, which consists of 13.5% of the population and are highly respected as opinion leaders. Early adopters enjoy leadership roles and embrace change opportunities, which makes them comfortable in adopting new ideas. They do not take as many risks as innovators and tend to make more reasoned decisions as to whether or not to adopt a certain behavior. Some characteristics of early adopters include technology-focused, visionary, willing to take risks and experiment. They're project-oriented and are skeptical and critical when it comes to new innovations.
Early majority. The early majority makes up 34% of the overall population. The early majority is the first major segment of a population to widely adapt to a new innovation. In this group, you will find individuals take their time to support a new innovation. They want to weigh out the pros and the cons. The early majority observe, then go based off the observations made from the early adopters. They cautiously embrace the innovation after they notice good results coming from the early adopters. If the early majority has an enthusiastic set of consumers and have seen the benefits of the new innovation, they can choose to adapt to the innovation.
Late majority. The late majority consists of 34% of the population in a social structure. In this group, you will find individuals who are skeptical and resistant of change. They are not the first from the majority to adopt the new innovation. Although they are skeptical and resistant to change, this population is more responsive to peer pressure, meaning that they can be easily influenced by the innovators, the early adopters, and the early majority. The population that makes up the late majority usually has limited resources, like socioeconomic status. So when a new innovation arises, they want to see the innovation used and they want to see the results before adopting the innovation. So when eventually they adopt the innovation, they need to make sure that their investment was worthwhile. Laggards. The laggards consist of 16% of the population in a social structure. In this group, you will find individuals that are the last to adopt innovations. In some cases, this group doesn't adopt any innovations. The laggards tend to isolate themselves and interact with other laggards within their community, which makes them a hard-to-reach population. They are even hard to reach using the media for marketing strategies, as they may have minimal access to media sources. The population tends to be very traditional or old-fashioned and use generational experiences to influence their opinions. which makes them highly resistant to change. The laggards also may have limited resources that for them, in order to adopt an innovation, they need to make sure it does not fail.
As was stated previously, innovators don't need much to be convinced to try new innovations. They love new ideas and they don't care if something seems a little bit too complicated for them. They will try it if it means replacing old habits or old products. So, a strategy we could use to increase adaptation for this population is make a GoFundMe page. And we can advertise that page on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, basically any social media. We could spin it as fidget cubes are better than fidget spinners. Fidget spinners are old, outdated, they're overrated. Too many people like fidget spinners. But fidget cubes are new, they're quieter, they're not as annoying, and they're actually pretty fun. They basically have more to offer than fidget spinners, which I think people would really like.
Early adopters hold a leadership role to influence later potential adopters. Early adopters are very active on social media and are known to be the ones who often leave reviews for products. They are more concerned about their reputation as being ahead of the curve. Some marketing strategies to increase adaptation are to come up with something that they can put to use right away and experiment with. What they need must be understood in order for your product to be successful. Early adopters are super critical, therefore, accepting their criticism is important as a means to make your product better. And a great way to get the attention of the early adopters is through social media ads, since we want to target younger consumers as they make up the majority of the early adopters.
Fidget cubes to cope with anxiety using the early majority. As mentioned earlier, the early majority has to see the benefits in the innovation in order to adapt to it. This meaning that the innovation has to be reliable, it shouldn't break down after a couple of uses. The early majority is thoughtful in accepting change if the innovation is worth it. Some marketing strategies to increase adaptation could be the first 200 students who purchase a fidget cube will receive a discounted price, and students who refer 5 other students, family, or friends receive a fidget cube for free.
Fidget cubes to cope with anxiety. How to market to late majority. The population that makes up the late majority tends to be focused on refraining from adopting an innovation. They like to observe how many others have or are using the innovation and its effectiveness. Due to their lower resources, they want to make sure they make the right decision when adopting an innovation. And they also tend to be influenced by others. My marketing strategy to increase the use of fidget cubes to help cope with anxiety is the following. First, disseminating information, such as directing students to YouTube videos on successes of the fidget cube presented by influencers that are skilled on products. This strategy will help with trust and reassurance that the fidget cube is a good product to use for anxiety. Second, fidget cubes are not a big financial commitment. Fidget cubes can be easily accessed on Amazon.com and prices start at $6.99. And the best part of it is that students have access to reviews on the effectiveness of fidget cubes. Third, we can conduct virtual focus groups or meetings with other fellow students to explain the experiences they have coping with anxiety with the use of fidget cubes. This will help influence the late majority to uptake fidget cubes to cope with anxiety. Fidget cubes to cope with anxiety. Marketing to laggards. As highlighted earlier, laggards are a hard to reach population. They tend to be very traditional, which makes them resistant to change. And they have limited resources. My marketing strategy to increase uptake of fidget cube use is as follows. 1. I will target the population on campus by distributing flyers
or partnering up with health programs around campus to find students who belong to the laggard population. 2. Using the influence that professors have and nurses and doctors at the clinic, we can specifically offer and explain how fidget cubes may help with their anxiety. A good way is by providing statistics on the use of fidget cubes and what they do to reduce anxiety. 3rd, utilizing school resources will limit the barriers that students may encounter, such as providing a computer for them to order a product online. And if money is a barrier, we can offer sanitized fidget cubes around campus for them to use in between classes, and offer opportunities where the fidget cubes may be free for students.
And this concludes our presentation.